No one ever told me that damnation could feel so righteous. I certainly never read such a notion in the Commissaria manuals, nor heard it in the stern speeches of the Lord Generals. Quite the opposite. They said bloodlust was weakness, that rage uncontrolled would destroy discipline. And yet here I stand, my soul surely damned beyond redemption, and all I feel is clarity. A burning, violent clarity that cuts through every doubt I ever harbored about the Emperor's Imperium. In this moment, standing ankle-deep in the blood of both heretic and loyal soldier alike, I feel more alive than I ever did reciting the Articles of War. The paradox would almost make me laugh, but I've forgotten how to laugh at anything except the screams of the dying. My name is Andrus Kaine, though that identity feels increasingly irrelevant with each skull I take. 5 years ago, I was a decorated Commissar Captain of the Officio Prefectus, maintaining discipline and morale among the Imperial Guard regiments on the Eastern Fringe. I had a spotless record, commendations from 3 Lord Generals, and the respect of every regiment I served with. I executed cowards without hesitation, led charges that turned the tide of battles, and believed with absolute conviction that the Emperor's will flowed through my every action. Simple faith for a simple man in service to an empire built on blood and bones. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a seduction measured in drops of blood and moments of escalating violence. Looking back, the signs were obvious. The way my heart raced, not with fear, but excitement before each execution. How I volunteered for the bloodiest assaults. The growing disappointment I felt when enemies surrendered rather than fought to the death. By the time I realized what was happening, the hooks were already too deep to extract without tearing myself apart. This morning's ritual begins as it always does now, with the counting of skulls. I examine the collection I've taken over the past weeks, running my fingers over bones still slick with dried blood. 23 new trophies since the last count. Not enough. Never enough. The hunger gnaws at me constantly now, a rage that demands feeding. It began on Tertius Mortis, a war-torn industrial world where the Imperium had been grinding against an orc Wa for 3 brutal years. I was attached to the 88th Cadian Regiment, my duty clear. Maintain discipline, execute the weak, drive the men forward through fear and example. For months, we prosecuted the war with cold imperial efficiency. I had executed 17 soldiers for cowardice in that time, shot 3 officers for incompetence, personally led dozens of charges that pushed the greenskin filth back meter by bloody meter. I was exemplary at my job, a model commissar. My uniform remained immaculate despite the trenches. My bolt pistol was maintained to parade standards. My faith was an unassailable fortress. The final assault on Hive Mortalis came, without warning from high command. 3 full regiments committed to a massed attack that would either break the orc lines or break us trying. We advanced at dawn through streets choked with rubble and week-old corpses. The stench would have made lesser men vomit. But we were Cadians. We'd smelled worse. I marched at the company's head, bolt pistol ready, power sword humming, leading the litany of hate. The men chanted with me, their voices drowning out distant orc war cries. Then we hit their defensive line and the world exploded into glorious violence. Orc slugafire shredded our front ranks. Crude rockets screamed overhead, detonating in shrapnel storms. Men died in droves, torn apart or hacked down by greenskins, wielding axes bigger than a man. The line wavered. Fear crept into eyes around me. This was my moment. I raised my bolt pistol and executed a fleeing private, his head exploding in red mist that painted the soldiers behind him. For the Emperor, I roared. Death or glory. Forward. Terror of me overrode their terror of orcs. We crashed into the greenskin line like an avalanche of flesh and hate. My power sword carved through Xenos bodies, the disruption field reducing muscle and bone to smoking ruin. I remember laughing as I fought, though I didn't understand why at the time. The battle raged for hours. By midday, I had killed more orcs than I could count, my power sword arm burning with exertion, but singing with satisfaction. The rage that had always been carefully controlled, channeled into disciplined violence, began to slip its leash. I found myself seeking out the largest orcs, the toughest fights, not out of tactical necessity, but because I wanted to, needed to. Each kill sent a surge of hot pleasure through my veins that had nothing to do with serving the Emperor and everything to do with the act itself. During a brief lull in the fighting, I noticed something strange. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or exhaustion. They trembled with anticipation, with hunger for more violence. When I raised my bolt pistol to check its ammunition, I saw my reflection in its polished surface. My face was flushed, eyes too bright, smile too wide. I looked like a man in the grip of some powerful narcotic. Colonel Veers found me in the temporary command post we'd established in a bombed-out administratum building. He was concerned about our casualties, over 40% in the first wave alone. He wanted to call for reinforcement before the next push. I remember staring at him as he spoke, watching his mouth move, and feeling nothing but contempt. This coward wanted to wait, to hesitate, when there were still orcs out there to kill, when the rage demanded satisfaction. I told him we would attack within the hour. He protested, citing proper Imperial doctrine for urban warfare. I shot him. The bolt round took him in the chest, detonating inside his ribcage and painting the wall behind him with chunks of lung and spine. The other officers present froze in shock. I holstered my pistol calmly and informed them I was assuming battlefield command, as was my right when faced with incompetent leadership that endangered the mission. No one argued. They had seen what happened to those who disagreed with commissars. Within the hour, we attacked again. This time I led from the front, abandoning any pretense of tactical oversight. I needed to be in the thick of it, needed to feel my blade bite into flesh, needed to smell blood in the air. The Cadians followed because they feared me more than death. We carved through 2 more orc positions that day. By nightfall, I was drenched head to toe in blood, none of it mine. My power sword's disruption field had burned out from overuse. My bolt pistol was empty. But I still had my hands, and I'd used them to beat an orc knob to death when I ran out of ammunition. Felt its skull crack under my fists, its blood hot on my face. That night, alone in a commandeered officer's quarters, I should have felt horror at what I'd become. Instead, I felt elation. The finest combat drugs couldn't match the high I experienced. Every nerve ending sang. My heart hammered not with exhaustion, but with exhilaration. I looked at my reflection in a cracked mirror, really looked, and saw something had changed. My eyes had a reddish tinge I'd never noticed before. The veins in my temples stood out prominently, pulsing visibly. Most disturbing was my smile. I couldn't stop smiling. When had I started smiling during combat? Commissars didn't smile. We were grim executors of the Emperor's will, not berserkers reveling in slaughter. But the word berserker felt right in a way nothing else had in years. Sleep brought dreams, vivid and terrible. I stood on a mountain of skulls that reached toward a blood-red sky. Rivers of blood flowed around the mountain's base, and the air itself seemed to scream with rage and violence. At the mountain's peak sat a throne of brass and bone, and upon it sat something vast and terrible. I couldn't see its face, only the impression of overwhelming power and fury. It spoke without words, its meaning hammering directly into my mind like nails driven into flesh. You are mine. You have always been mine. Every execution, every battle, every drop of blood you've spilled was a prayer to me. The Emperor is a corpse. I am eternal. Kill for me and no glory. Kill for me and no purpose. Blood for the blood god. Skulls for the skull throne. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat that smelled like copper. The dream should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like a revelation. For the first time in my career, something, had acknowledged what I truly was. Not a disciplinarian maintaining order, but a killer. A weapon. And that vast presence in the dream understood me in a way the distant, silent Emperor never had. I tried to pray, to recite the articles of faith and banish these heretical thoughts. But the words felt hollow, meaningless. They always had, I realized. I'd been mouthing empty phrases my entire life, convincing myself I felt the Emperor's presence when there was nothing but my own voice echoing in the void. The next week was a blur of escalating violence. We pushed deeper into orc-held territory, and I drove the men forward with increasing brutality. I executed anyone who showed the slightest hesitation, sometimes for no reason except that my rage demanded blood, and they were convenient. The men began to fear me more than the orcs, which made them fight with desperate ferocity. Our casualty rate was astronomical, but we were winning. That's all that mattered to command. Results. I was getting results, so they asked no questions about my methods. No one wanted to look too closely at the pile of skulls I'd started keeping in my quarters, taken from both enemy and executed deserters. No one questioned why I'd stopped filing execution reports, or why I'd begun leading charges shirtless, howling like a madman. One night, a regimental priest came to speak with me. Father Matthias was an old man, been ministering to guard regiments for 40 years. He'd seen every kind of horror war could produce. He sat across from me in my commandeered office, his weathered face grave with concern. "Commissar Kaine," he began carefully, "the men are frightened, not of the enemy, of you. They say you've changed, that you take pleasure in killing beyond what duty requires. I've heard reports of executions without proper cause, of you collecting trophies from the dead. These are signs of corruption, son. Let me help you. Let us pray together, cleanse whatever darkness has taken root." I listened to his words, really heard the genuine concern in his voice, and felt nothing but contempt. This withered fool wanted to save me. From what? From finally understanding my purpose. I stood slowly, drawing my power sword. The priest's eyes widened. "Commissar, please. The Emperor loves you." "He watches over," I cut him down, mid-sentence. One stroke, clean through the neck. His head hit the floor and rolled, coming to rest against my boot. I picked it up, looked into his dead eyes, and felt satisfaction bloom hot in my chest. "Your Emperor is silent, old man. He never answered your prayers. But I found a God who responds, one who appreciates what I truly am." That was my first intentional murder, as opposed to arguably justified executions. It should have been. A line I couldn't cross. Instead, it felt liberating. I added the priest's skull to my collection after carefully removing the flesh. The act of preparing it was meditative, calming. I understood then that I'd been fighting my true nature my entire career. The commissariat had given me license to kill, dressed it up in duty and discipline. But what I really was, what I'd always been, was a killer. Khorne, the blood god I'd glimpsed in my dreams, understood that, valued it, demanded it. Over the following days, I felt changes accelerating. My temper grew shorter, erupting into violence at the slightest provocation. My need for combat became overwhelming, painful, if not satisfied. I began hearing a voice in my head during battles, urging me on, promising power and glory in exchange for more skulls, more blood. The voice spoke in a language I shouldn't understand but did, guttural and primal, echoing with the clash of the weapons and screams of the dying. it promised me transformation, ascension to something greater than a mere mortal enforcer of a dying empire's will. All I had to do was give in completely, stop fighting what I was becoming. The final battle for Tertius Mortis came 3 weeks after my transformation began. Intel reported the war boss had consolidated his forces in the planetary capital's central spire. High Command ordered a final assault, all remaining forces committed to one massive push. We would break the orcs here or die trying. I welcomed it. The rage inside me had grown to unbearable levels. I needed violence on a scale that would finally satisfy the hunger consuming me from within. I stood before the assembled regiment the night before the assault, 2,000 men who'd been through hell together. And I spoke truth for perhaps the first time in my career. Tomorrow we go to glory, not for the Emperor, but for ourselves, for the joy of battle, for the ecstasy of slaughter. The weak will die. The strong will bathe in blood. There is no mercy in war, only victory and death. Choose which you want. The speech horrified the remaining officers. I could see it in their faces. This wasn't standard Commissaria doctrine. This was heresy wrapped in violence. But the men, the common soldiers who'd been killing and dying for months, who'd been pushed beyond human limits, they understood. They'd felt it too, that rush of savage joy when blade met flesh, that primal satisfaction of survival through violence. My words gave them permission to embrace what war had made them. When I finished speaking, they didn't chant the Emperor's name. They roared wordlessly, a sound of pure, aggressive hunger that shook the very walls. In that moment, I'd converted them. Not to chaos, not yet, but to the cult of violence itself. The assault began at dawn. We hit the orc lines with everything we had. Artillery pounded their positions. Air support strafed their ranks. And then we charge, a wave of humanity driven by rage and bloodlust rather than discipline and duty. I led from the front, no longer even pretending to command. I was just another killer, howling as I carved through green-skinned bodies. My power sword sang, my bolt pistol thundered, and when both ran dry, I used my fists, my teeth, anything to keep killing. The orcs met us with equal savagery. This was their kind of fight. No tactics, no strategy, just brutal melee where only the strongest survived. Somewhere in the chaos, I found the war boss. It was massive, even for an orc, covered in crude armor plates and wielding a power claw that could tear through tank armor. It saw me, recognized a worthy opponent, and charged with a bellowing war cry. We met in a circle cleared by the violence around us, our forces giving space for this duel. We fought for what felt like hours but was probably minutes. The war boss was strong, fast for its size, experienced. But I had something it didn't. I had absolute commitment to violence without fear, without reservation. When it raised its claw to deliver a killing blow, I didn't dodge. I stepped inside its reach and drove my power sword through its throat, the blade erupting from the back of its skull in a spray of gore. The war boss collapsed, and I stood over its corpse, chest heaving, drenched in blood. The orcs saw their leader fall, and their momentum faltered. The Cadians, seeing me triumphant, surged forward with renewed fury. The tide turned. We pushed them back, slaughtering them to the last. By the time night fell, the capital was ours. The Wa was broken. Tertius Mortis was saved for the Imperium. And I stood alone on a pile of orc corpses, my mind singing with the voice I'd been hearing for weeks. Well done, my champion. You have proven yourself worthy. Now come to me. Shed the last chains of your false loyalty. Become what you were always meant to be. After the victory, there should have been celebration, commendations, perhaps even promotion. Instead, I was summoned to face an inquisitor. Lord Inquisitor Grayson of the Ordo Hereticus had been monitoring the campaign, and my recent behavior had drawn his attention. The execution of Colonel Veers might have been justified as battlefield necessity, but Father Matthias's murder could not be explained away. Someone had reported it, probably one of the surviving officers who still remembered what loyalty to the Emperor meant. I stood in the commandeered chapel that served as Grayson's temporary headquarters, still wearing my blood-caked uniform, and faced judgment. "Commissar Kaine," Grayson began, his voice cold as the void, "you have served the Imperium with distinction for 15 years. Your record was exemplary. But in recent weeks, you have exhibited behavior consistent with Khorne corruption, unnecessary executions, collection of skulls, berserker tactics. Most damningly, the murder of an ecclesiarchy priest. I could have you executed on the spot for that alone. Instead, I'm offering you a choice. Submit to purification rites and deep purgation. If your soul can be saved, you will serve the rest of your days in a penitent crusade. If not, you will die clean. This is mercy." I listened to his words, processing what he offered. Mercy. He called it mercy. The chance to have my mind scoured, my memories burned away, everything that made me who I'd become erased in the name of purity. To become a hollow shell, serving an empire that had never once answered my prayers, that demanded everything and gave nothing in return. Or to die. Those were my options. Grayson continued, "I've seen this before. Good men, strong men, fall to chaos because they mistake bloodlust for strength. But there's a difference between doing your duty and reveling in slaughter. One serves the Emperor, the other serves the blood god. Which do you serve, Commissar?" The question hung in the air. Behind Grayson stood his retinue, stormtroopers with hell guns trained on me, a psyker with glowing eyes reading my thoughts, an assassin in the shadows I could sense but not see. I was surrounded, outgunned, with no way out if I chose wrong. But that was the thing. I'd already chosen. I'd made my choice the moment I felt joy instead of duty when I killed. The moment I heard Khorne's voice and recognized it as truth instead of lies. "I am done serving a corpse," I said quietly. The words felt like liberation. Grayson's expression hardened. "So be it." He raised his hand to give the execution order. I moved before he could speak, drawing my bolt pistol in one fluid motion and putting 3 rounds center mass into his chest. His Rosarius force field flared, absorbing the first 2 shots, but the third punched through as the field collapsed. He went down, hard. Chaos erupted in the chapel. Stormtroopers opened fire. Last rounds seared past me. I dove behind a pew, returning fire, dropping 2 of them before they could adjust. The psyker began chanting, reality warping around him. As he prepared to unleash warp fire, I threw my power sword like a spear. It wasn't meant for throwing, but rage and something else, perhaps Khorne's favor, guided it true. The blade took the psyker through the eye, and his scream of pain became a psychic shockwave that knocked everyone in the room flat. I charged through the confusion, retrieving my sword from the psyker's twitching corpse, and cutting down stormtroopers as they tried to regain their feet. The assassin emerged from the shadows, monomolecular blade aimed at my throat. We traded blows, her speed and skill against my rage-enhanced strength. She was better trained, but I didn't care about taking hits. I accepted a stab through my shoulder to get inside her guard and beat her face in with my pistol until she stopped moving. When silence finally fell, I stood alone in the chapel, surrounded by corpses, breathing hard, bleeding from a dozen wounds, and alive. More than alive, reborn. Killing an inquisitor is a death sentence, no matter the circumstances. Within hours, every Imperial force on Tertius Mortis would be hunting me. I had to move fast. I gathered those soldiers most loyal to me, about 50 men who'd embraced the violence as I had, who'd felt the same savage joy in battle. I told them the truth. I'd killed the Inquisitor. The Imperium would brand us traitors. But I offered them something better than dying for a silent god. I offered them freedom to be what war had made us. Warriors, killers, champions of the blood god. To my surprise, and perhaps to theirs, most accepted. We weren't deserters fleeing battle. We were warriors rejecting a lie. We disappeared into Tertius Mortis's underhive, that vast network of abandoned factories and collapsed hab blocks beneath the war-torn surface. There in the darkness, we found others like us. Gangers who'd spent their lives killing for survival. Soldiers from other regiments who'd gone rogue, even a few space marines. World eaters, traitor Astartes, who'd been waging a shadow war against the Imperium for decades. It was one of these, a berserker named Khorne, who completed my transformation. He saw what I was becoming and offered to accelerate it through ritual and surgery. The ceremony took place in a chamber deep in the underhive, where ancient cult symbols had been carved into walls millennia ago by followers of the blood god. They laid me on an altar of brass and bone. Khorne wielded tools that were part surgical implement, part torture device. He carved Khorne's symbols into my flesh, 8 pointed stars and runic script that burned as they were etched. He implanted devices called butcher's nails, archaeotech that would enhance my aggression, dull my capacity for fear and pain, turn me into the perfect killer. The procedure was agony beyond anything I'd experienced. I felt my mind being rewired, my emotions stripped away until only rage remained. But I didn't scream. I laughed, because for the first time in my existence, I felt complete. When Khorne finally stepped back, his work done, I rose from the altar as something new, still human in form, but no longer in spirit. My eyes glowed with a faint red light. My skin had taken on a pallor that spoke of something beyond mortality. The butcher's nails sang in my skull, a constant low hum of controlled aggression that made every heartbeat feel like preparation for violence. I looked at my reflection in a pool of blood at the altar's base and saw not Commissar Andrus Kaine, but something else. A champion of Khorne, a blood champion. We spent the following months building our warband in the underhive, recruiting from the desperate and the damned. I trained them not in imperial doctrine, but in the way of the warrior, the path of pure violence unshackled from notions of honor or mercy. Kill because you can. Kill because you must. Kill for the glory of Khorne and the promise of eternal war. Our numbers grew. 50 became 100. 100 became 500. We raided Imperial supply lines, killed patrol groups, and left mountains of skulls as offerings to the blood god. Each kill made us stronger. Each victory brought more converts who were tired of dying for a silent god and wanted to live, truly live, through battle. 5 years have passed since I killed that Inquisitor and embraced Khorne. 5 years of constant warfare, moving from world to world, leading my warband in service to the blood god. We no longer hide in underhives. We fight openly, wearing our allegiance with pride. My armor is no longer the black and red of the commissariat, but brass and crimson, decorated with skulls and chains. The butcher's nails sing constantly now, drowning out any thought except the next battle, the next kill. I am exactly what I was always meant to be, a weapon, pure and simple. They call me Kaine the Blood Champion now, apostate commissar, traitor to the Imperium, favored of Khorne. I lead raids against Imperial positions, corrupting soldiers as I was corrupted, showing them the lie they serve. The Emperor sits silent on his throne while we fight and die for his dead dream. But Khorne rewards those who kill in his name. Power, strength, purpose. These are real, tangible, earned through action rather than empty faith. Every world we raid, every regiment we face, I search for others like me. Those who feel the rage building, who sense the hollowness of imperial doctrine, who crave something more than blind obedience. Some resist and die. Others join us willingly, grateful for liberation. Do I regret it? The question itself is meaningless now. Regret is an emotion the butcher's nails burned away, along with fear and doubt. I am incapable of regret. But if I could feel it, would I? I don't think so. I spent 15 years serving the Imperium, executing men for cowardice, leading charges for tactical objectives, maintaining discipline through terror. All of it duty, none of it mine. Now every battle I fight is mine. Every kill is personal. Every drop of blood spilled is an offering I choose to make. I am free in a way I never was as a commissar. Free to be the monster the Imperium created and then tried to deny. The Imperium taught me to kill efficiently, to view violence as a tool for enforcing order. Khorne taught me that violence is the only truth. Everything else, duty, honor, loyalty, these are lies we tell ourselves to justify what we really want. To dominate, to destroy, to prove our strength through the death of our enemies. I am no longer shackled by false virtue. I am what I am, and I glory in it. They say that chaos corrupts, that it twists good men into monsters. But I was never good. I was just disciplined. The Imperium gave me a gun and told me who to point it at. Khorne gave me purpose and told me why. The difference is everything. Sometimes I encounter Imperial forces I once served with, Cadians who survived Tertius Mortis, Commissars who knew me when I wore their uniform. They see what I've become and call it damnation. I see them still pretending their service means something and call it slavery. We fight. Usually they die. Sometimes I convert the survivors, showing them the truth through overwhelming violence. Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows, only that it flows. Every Imperial soldier who falls becomes either a skull for the throne or a new warrior for the warband. Either way, the blood god is pleased. The voice I first heard 5 years ago on Tertius Mortis never left. It speaks constantly now, part of my thoughts, inseparable from my own will. It promises ascension if I continue, transformation into something beyond mortal limits. A demon prince of Khorne, immortal and unstoppable. All I have to do is keep killing, keep offering skulls, keep proving my worth through violence. It's not even difficult. War is eternal in the 41st millennium. The Imperium provides endless enemies, and I have eternity to kill them. Once I was Commissar Captain Andrus Kaine, enforcer of Imperial will. Now I am Kaine the Blood Champion, favored of Khorne. I have fallen into the abyss of rage and violence. And from that abyss, I have emerged stronger, clearer, more alive than I ever was in the Emperor's service. They call it damnation. I call it apotheosis. Blood for the blood god. Skulls for the skull throne. Let the galaxy burn.